So I have this amazing set of panelists here right now. I'd love to share my thoughts over the next 15 odd minutes as per permitted time frame, and maybe a little more. Would love for it to be a little more interactive because it's a new age medium, and there could be a lot of questions. So I'm more than happy to have the monologue only for half of it, and take up questions on e-commerce. B2C, D2C, interestingly, was a good part of today's discussion. I believe that in some way or form, every business eventually is a direct to consumer in some ways. And it's just that the models and the channels keep changing. E-commerce is just another vehicle, I would believe, although I come from that part of it. I still believe that, right at the start, we were having a brief chit chat before the rest of the members joined. Brands or businesses that were traditionally offline have now moved to other channels as well, just to serve that consumer base as the consumer has matured. And vice versa, brands that were digital first only have moved traditional, just to serve that expanse and reach of the consumer. In times earlier, it's now called Omnichannel. It used to be earlier, assisted shopping, and then it moved to multi-channel, and now to Omnichannel. I think when you talk about retail, but even when I was a kid, I always believed that we used to call the kirana. It used to come home. That was a great format. Cash used to be transacted or not, and used to be settled at the end of the month by Papa coming later, and the kids could order anything. That's a different form of convenience that we've all seen coming from small to large places. I come from a place called Jamshedpur for the first 18 years of my life. I believe it's just that assisted shopping has moved to, when you call, there was phone shopping, there was, TV shopping, when the days of Rediff, Naptol, Star CJ, those are all just formats and conveniences that came into being because of the accessibility of the user, and the user accessing it over multiple touch points and devices. And I think these formats have emerged as innovation from businesses and in line with the consumers. I think fast forward into 2018, I think the last 2 years have seen a sudden acceleration of a trend that was anyway going to happen. Probably, it would have taken till 2025, but now it's reached that size in 2022 due to obvious, reasons we've seen in 2019 and 20, or actually 2021, where a lot of retailers or brands, were stuck, so to speak, with inventory and the inability to be actually having either exports or their retail offline presence open. And that is where exposing that merchandise or inventory to the same consumer through other channels by exposing omni-channel inventory became a necessity. And that innovation in the last 2 years that has catapulted is more driven by that necessity. In other countries, it's always been, in global countries, a lot of the esteemed panelists here have done businesses across the globe to know that omni-channel is really omni experience. But in India, it largely started as omni-fulfilment. Where the meaning was, how would you utilize inventory and serve it to the doorstep, because the Indian topography is very different in terms of the landscape and even the behavior pattern. I don't think anywhere in the country the cash transaction is as much in online commerce as it is in India. That brings with it a totally different set of experiences, and India has been a much more varied market in adoption of any such trend, because it has to first fit India. And then there was this entire challenge of what they call as returns, or what they call as RTO in India, or return to origin, where there was arguably about 30% of all retail is only delivered one way, and not actually consumed by the consumer. It comes back to the warehouse of businesses, and that's a huge number to factor for. So the challenges that we talk about in D2C, we are talking about scale and profitability today. I just have 3 or 4 very quick visual slides, if I could be allowed to share my screen. Yeah. Is that fine if I can just share a few slides? Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. So just 3 or 4 visual slides, not much text. But even taking up from some of the conversations in the last hour, I think there, when e-commerce started in India, and I'm talking about real D2C, the marketplaces have shown that the consumer has moved in 2014 to 18. But when we talk about D2C, I think businesses really ask, is this something that we can do by ourselves, by cutting out the middlemen? Can we provide the experience? Can we even scale it and yet be profitable? Or should we just work in the MBO or SIS format of retail, which is typically your marketplaces? So to speak, marketplaces have all forms of all sorts of models, inventory-less, bottomless. So it's very similar to offline in many ways. It's just that the definitions are different. The first 2 years were a lot of circumspect, where brands and businesses were saying, we didn't know whether this is here to stay. Why don't you start something, catch an agency like, let's say, GreenHonchos or anyone, and say, if it works, it's fine. If there is sales, then fine. If the money is made, then fine. Let's play a very small experiment, because it only constituted less than 3% of revenue for almost all retailers, especially the ones that were doing offline. Now that had to change significantly, because that 3% became 6 and 9 and 12 and 15 very, very fast. And at 3%, you don't necessarily need to drive the narrative, because you're selling product. You're not selling experience. But if you have to grow that business, then like good brands have done over the past traditionally, you have to create the narrative, talk to the consumer, improve your reach and awareness, build the content story. And that's where we feel that scaling the D2C business is not just about performance marketing and trying to push product, but actually getting relatable content of what you stand for, what are the USPs. It is the traditional, 4Ps, 5Ps of marketing. And over the course of growing a business, I believe the online is not very different. You could get that immediate injector or booster of steroids for a start, because you can push market across the same channels of marketing, largely Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, what have you. But beyond the point, you see diminishing point of return of sales, just due to the fact that your consumer base is not moving fast enough. And that's the tipping point where you believe that you'll have to put the horse before the cart and really start talking to your consumer and your unique value proposition. So that is one of the 4 tenets that I would like to talk about, which is content to commerce. The second critical aspect, and has always been, which is putting a customer or putting a consumer at the center or at the core. Sometimes e-commerce businesses have been blamed for being faceless, and therefore slightly lesser trusted. Tomorrow, if the local store or MBO or even a mall build its own e-commerce, it will have a much higher customer recall just because of that trust factor. And the consumer knows that if I have challenges, it is someone that we have transacted with in a very physical environment. Now that really needs to transcend, and someone like an Amazon, etc., has done a great job of building our trust by having that focus on the consumer. So, to the entire fraternity, I think e-commerce or e-retail gets a bad name if business owners do not responsibly manage their consumer experience post-order. India as a market, it's interestingly not as tough, I would say, and probably Aditya would echo it from this side of the ecosystem. Customer acquisition isn't the challenge, really. The customer will purchase, being able to deliver it, and all the problems start post the order experience. So globally, e-commerce platforms like Shopify or Magento, that are built for developed countries, have really made it easy for businesses to, get the purchase experience right. So India also adopted that. Fair enough. Tons of websites in e-commerce getting built. But hey, wait, e-commerce, Shopify or Magento, or all these guys that have globally been leaders, were all built for till the time an order is placed, for the order experience. Great. You view your product, you view your content, you choose your sizes, you do this, that, you can read your content, you can add to cart. Voila. And then comes India. Okay. All the problem starts thereafter. There's so many forms of payment. Who do I trust? COD try karke dekhte hain. Let's try some coupon codes. Let's see what doesn't work to try and see if it works. All those wonderful vagaries of this country, language. Let's try and call. Email notifications not going. Why don't you give it to me on WhatsApp? The checkout process being, not well understood in the Indian context of UI, UX, and design. Post order, someone wanting to change it up, even their payment form or even their address or their location. You have, we are deeply into the India space, and we've had examples of where folks are writing in English on the address line, mandir ke piche as their address, when the delivery guy calls, he says, "Acha, I've reached." They said, "Mera naam to yahan suna hi hoga, mandir pe aa jana." And they'll tell you where my house is, and that's interesting because it doesn't fit into the system like that. So, the consumer is different, and that's part of the reason why the huge holy grail in all of this is consumer doesn't have enough trust, and they are placing multiple orders but not really wanting those products. So multi-channel consumer contact, I think WhatsApp and WhatsApp commerce has really taken over because it's become something across ages that is being accessed. There is a return of apps for purchasing. Earlier apps wasn't as good for purchase or for commerce, but we've seen because of the growth, there it's extremely important to have and meet all touch points and remain as communicative as possible. The customer needs to get a similar experience across all touch points, especially if it is an offline store. Their points or their loyalty system has to work across both. They should be able to return their articles for any reason across both. If purchased online, then return offline, and vice versa. They should be able to walk in and they should say, "This is my brand." It's just different formats. They could be push marketing to me on an app, could be a store in a store somewhere, and that's what gives confidence to the consumer. The economics is all in repeat purchase anyway. I guess everyone who's in a business of retail knows and understands that. But whoever is able to get that journey right in terms of being able to showcase at a unique level, their collection or their experience, I think is able to scale and create more moats for themselves at this point, and innovate across the way. So that would be my second point here. So I'm also here taking a logical break and depending on my old friend Vikas to give me any time cues if I'm overshooting or talking too much.
Please continue.
So yeah, I just have a couple of slides. The third is customer acquisition. We talked about a bit how acquiring customers isn't really the holy grail. Although a lot of business owners feel, will the product be accepted? Will it be purchased? Who's going to see it? Who's going to buy? But there are general metrics that if you market a fair product at a fair price with a fair offer, it will result in views, it will result in impressions, it will result in traffic at a website. If the website's not broken, it will result in an add to cart, a cart to conversion, and a purchase. You can trust that process. So that's not really the challenge. I think it is all about the cost of customer acquisition. There's been a lot said about it, and the fact that, if I've got to sell a 400 rupee product, we can't be spending more than 80 rupees on customer acquisition, for example. I will admit that digital platforms in India haven't really got it. They can't, because the challenge is the landscape is the same. A Facebook comes and says, I'm still grown. I've gone to 1.5 billion USD in my revenues from last year, 1 billion. So why do I care about selling a 400 rupee product? There is Byju's, there's White Hat Junior, that is, or there's Digit Insurance, or there's something that's selling 80,000, 1 lakh rupee subscriptions on the same ad platforms. So why am I interested in retailing a 500 rupee product or a 2,000 rupee product? So that's a challenge that all retail is facing. We can't only be retailing high value products because that's not the long tail of the market. The long tail of the market in retail is still between 500 to 5,000 or 500 to even 1,500 rupees. How does that really fit in? And there is where I think there's a lot more innovation going to come into this market, because that is still waiting to explode. Businesses can't just in hope being acquiring customers at a negative P&L. Repeat customer purchase where we are not actually marketing for each sale, is important. In offline, you have that advantage because you've got a location, you've got a store, a significant portion of people walk in. You don't have to continue to market to that consumer. You have new customer acquisition. But in digital, as was told a little earlier in that session, that you've got to keep marketing. Your second purchase, your third purchase, your fourth purchase, everything's coming through an ad. So you're not really able to monetize that necessarily unless you're doing it smarter. There are a lot more channels now available to reduce your cost of customer acquisition. We're talking about organic being the new paid, which means consumers, consuming your content, your knowledge, your experience, that you're being able to provide. And businesses, even in such a short time frame, have as high as a 40% repeat customer purchase in such a short time frame, which speaks well about how even online customers could be sticky, because there is also a lot of talk about, let's be honest, is there even the concept of loyalty in online? Does it even exist? Is it a word we should talk about at all? But I do believe, and a lot of us as industry thought leaders in the e-commerce space believe that the consumer is the same. It's not that they do not want to be loyal. The onus is on us to be able to, as a fraternity or as a cycle, be able to generate that trust. Yes, we have challenges. There is no barrier to entry in setting up an e-commerce business. It's the biggest advantage, but also the biggest disadvantage. Because even if Facebook has realized in India, there are too many people that set up a website with 4 products and at ridiculous prices and collect money and don't fulfill orders. So then they say, no, we will not allow people to market till they have delivered products. And then your spend limit on your ads gets released and increased basis customer feedback. So that's a good policing that has gone into the system. I was speaking to the country head of Shopify the other day, and the other challenge that they had is very differently. They came with the same model in India as they had globally, and they realized that India was the only place where Shopify websites had to be built by agencies. They were typically not meant to be, so they never knew that that was needed really. But in India, agencies like us are, and Aditya's probably are charging money for building Shopify websites. Great. So and the other thing they realized is, what, in India, the long tail is so long that it continues to wag and sometimes triangulate. What I meant by that is 80% of the Shopify stores are using the Shopify website as their new visiting card. They don't transact. So Shopify is just really funding an e-commerce site, and everyone's saying, I got e-commerce, but there's no transaction. They didn't face this problem globally because businesses were transacting on it, and Shopify was taking a transaction fee. So in India, they're not making any transaction fee for 80% of the websites. Only 20% of them are actually doing some business. So Shopify is having to change its model in India, saying, you know what, it seems India is forever, or for a good time, going to be a managed model. It's not DIY, it is DIFM, which is do it for me. So it's an interesting spin, and that's why I think we all love India, and we all love that, we all can, entrepreneur our way through so many interesting models. So all the challenges that a e-commerce store owner has is not solved by Shopify, but solved by a lot of great innovation by India-based apps around it. There could be MarTech apps, there could be post-order apps, there could be retention apps, there could be tons of them. But if someone has to run a good Shopify store or anything, Magento store or whatever, they need to spend a lot more after that to get it going and running, which was not the case in global markets. So, that brings me to my last couple of slides. There is also the thought that, or I'll actually come back to this at the last. Yeah, we were talking about profitability and scaling. This was supposed to be a white elephant, but the color didn't, suit much. But I do want to talk about the cart. This is a cart. This is an e-commerce cart, and it moves slowly in some places because of the weight of the white elephant. Businesses get very excited with the fact that, oh, you know what, there are lots of orders. It took a lot of businesses, there were a lot of, even exporters that created a private label, went on Myntra, saw great money. And after 1 year, they realized when the balance sheet came, there was lots of volume, but no money to make. Yeah. E-commerce tends to do that. And that is where a lot of business owners got a little jaded and said, you know what, this doesn't work for us. उससे अच्छा तो दुकान है, गल्ला खोलते गल्ला बंद करते. We know what's around, we know exactly what we need to do. It's not rocket science, because ultimately all businesses are for the customer and for making money. So true D2C has actually started happening only now when the enabler ecosystem has come together, and said it's not just about marketing your way through, it is about managing the order experience. There are certain things that really need to happen. I can talk about a few examples. I think businesses should be very, very careful about the cost of logistics, because ultimately the only guys who are making money are logistics players. They don't care whether the order is fulfilled or not. They would make more money if the order is not fulfilled, because they have two-way logistics instead of one. And two-way logistics is costlier than one-way logistics by 1.2x. So in one order, they would gain 2.2x. which is 1, 2 and 1.2 fro. So by the time businesses understand the impact of those 30% of the orders that come back, it's too late. So what's your serviceability pin code areas? Who do you market to? Who has transacted at the network level and is a repeat COD returner? Should we only allow prepaid for such customers till the time your customer history is built? What are the reasons that impact the P&L? What's the value of discounting? Many feel that e-commerce is only a discount-led channel. I can assure you that full price merchandise has begun to sell in e-commerce in the last 2 years because of the ease and convenience and the consumer broad basing its channels, unlike earlier where it was more a stock dump for all season merchandise. So there is an opportunity for optimizing for profitability. We do know of D2C businesses that have even scaled to 10 CR a month profitably in e-commerce. So that is clearly a possibility. And then that takes me to my last slide here, which is there is a difference in visual merchandising, or VM as they call it in stores, between online and offline. But it's still as important, which is often ignored to impact or improve your conversions. Where at the end of the day, we're paying at the top of the funnel for acquiring customers, and then it keeps trickling down, and on an average, about 1% or 1.5% of consumers that visit your website actually end up purchasing, which is a huge drip in the funnel. But there are certain areas of managing drip. I think there's a lot of science and study that has gone into VM on the offline space. I do personally believe that we need the same expertise in the online space as well. Simple things like, what are the top 20 products you're showcasing on each landing page on a website? Are they full size sets? Are they a new season? What are you showing on your homepage, which is your true VM? What's your communication? What's your content? There is so much of investment going in the offline space season on season just for this. And I believe that there is enough space for the exact same science to actually come online as well and improve conversions over time. So that's my story. A brief 20-minute, I think so. I probably got over passionate about it through the way. But from where we look at it, as GreenHonchos, this is the D2C enablement space as we see it. We love partnering with brands who have an intent to scale. And today, there are a lot of new age categories apart from fashion, which is footwear, apparel, accessories, but consumer packaged goods, beauty and personal care, extremely interesting stories, building out of great customer trust and value proposition. So we look forward to actively contribute here and to the fraternity. Thank you for my time.